In 1993, in the basement of a destroyed apartment building in Sarajevo, a man named Elvir held 17 gold coins, his family's entire wealth. 3 generations of savings converted to portable metal. The city was under siege. No food, no electricity, no medicine. Elvir approached a neighbor who had stockpiled canned goods before the war began. He offered 1 gold coin for a case of beans. The neighbor refused. Gold, he explained, was useless. You cannot eat it. You cannot burn it for warmth. You cannot trade it to the soldiers at checkpoints. He wanted cigarettes, batteries, antibiotics. Elvir's family survived the siege, but not because of gold. They survived because his wife knew how to treat wounds with improvised supplies, and his brother could repair generators. The 17 coins sat untouched for 4 years. Every financial advisor tells you to buy gold before the collapse. But what if they're preparing you for the wrong crisis? Right now, as you watch this, central banks are buying gold at the fastest pace since 1967. In 2024 alone, central banks accumulated over 1,037 tons of gold. China added to its reserves for 18 consecutive months. Poland, Singapore, Turkey, India, all racing to convert paper reserves into metal. The World Gold Council calls it unprecedented demand. Financial media calls it smart money positioning. And the message to ordinary investors is clear. Follow the central banks. Buy gold. Protect yourself. This advice is everywhere. Every financial newsletter, every prepper forum, every YouTube channel warning about the coming collapse. Gold is the hedge. Gold is safety. Gold has been money for 5,000 years. But here's what they're not telling you. Central banks aren't buying gold for the same reason they want you to buy gold. Central banks buy gold for geopolitical leverage, for reserve diversification away from the dollar, for balance sheet optics. They buy gold because they can store it in vaults protected by armies. They buy gold because they will never need to trade it for bread in a crisis. You will. And that changes everything. Warren Buffett currently sits on $325 billion in cash and treasury bills, the largest cash position in Berkshire Hathaway's history. When asked about gold, Buffett's answer has never changed. Gold gets dug out of the ground in Africa, then we melt it down, dig another hole, bury it again, and pay people to stand around guarding it. It has no utility. Buffett isn't buying gold, he's buying cash flow, he's buying productive assets. He's waiting for prices to collapse so he can acquire businesses that make things, employ people, generate income. Ray Dalio, the billionaire who built Bridgewater Associates into the world's largest hedge fund, has warned repeatedly about a paradigm shift in the global monetary order. He recommends gold as part of a diversified portfolio. But here's what's buried in the footnotes of his research. Dalio also emphasizes productive assets, skills, and what he calls storehold of wealth that has intrinsic value. Gold, in Dalio's framework, is one piece. Not the foundation, not the primary hedge, one piece. Yet the financial media extracts only the gold recommendation. Because gold is simple, gold is sellable, gold makes for good headlines. The complete strategy, the part about productive capacity, practical skills, community networks, doesn't fit in a tweet. It doesn't sell newsletters, it doesn't generate affiliate commissions from gold dealers, so you hear only half the advice. And half the advice in a real collapse gets people killed. Here's the pattern that history reveals again and again across centuries and continents. Gold works as a hedge in financial crises, recessions, market corrections, currency devaluations that don't spiral into social breakdown. But gold fails in civilizational crises, sieges, hyperinflations that destroy social trust. Systemic collapses where institutions stop functioning and supply chains disintegrate. The difference is critical. In a financial crisis, banks wobble but ATMs still work. Supply chains strain, but grocery stores stay open. The government struggles, but police still patrol. Gold holds value because the systems that assign value to gold remain intact. In a civilizational crisis, those systems collapse. And when systems collapse, gold becomes what it physically is. A soft yellow metal with no practical utility. You cannot eat it. You cannot plant it. You cannot defend your family with it. You cannot heal wounds with it. You cannot generate electricity with it. The central banks buying gold today are betting on financial crisis. They are not preparing for civilizational crisis. They have armies to protect their vaults, they have first access to food supplies, they have secure transportation out of danger zones. You have none of that. So the question becomes, which crisis are you preparing for? Because if you're preparing for the wrong one, if you're stacking gold coins while ignoring the assets that actually matter when systems fail, you're not hedging, you're hoping. And hope, as the history of collapsed civilizations demonstrates with brutal clarity, is not a survival strategy. The evidence is documented, the pattern is consistent, and it begins with understanding why governments have always eventually come for the gold. On April 5, 1933, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 61 Taidu. The language was bureaucratic. The effect was confiscation. Every American citizen was required to surrender their gold coins, gold bullion, and gold certificates to the Federal Reserve. The deadline, May 5, 1933. The penalty for non-compliance, up to 10 years in federal prison and a $10,000 fine, equivalent to $230,000 today. The government paid $20.67 per ounce. Then, once the gold was collected, Roosevelt revalued it to $35 per ounce. A 69% overnight devaluation of every dollar Americans held. The gold they surrendered was now worth nearly double what they received. Wealth transfer, executed through legal decree. This was not ancient history. This was not a foreign dictatorship. This was the United States of America, 92 years ago, and it was not an anomaly. 2 years earlier, in September 1931, Britain abandoned the gold standard. The pound sterling, the world's reserve currency for over a century, was de-linked from gold. British citizens who held gold found their metal subject to new regulations, new restrictions, new government oversight. The empire that had dominated global finance for generations had just announced that the rules no longer applied. 30 years later, Charles de Gaulle began demanding France's gold back from American vaults. Between 1962 and 1966, France repatriated over 3,000 tons of gold from the New York Federal Reserve. De Gaulle understood something that most investors ignored. When gold is stored in another nation's vault, it is not truly yours. It is a claim, a promise, and promises in times of crisis are broken. De Gaulle called the dollar-based system America's exorbitant privilege. He warned that it could not last. He was dismissed as a nationalist, a troublemaker, an economic illiterate. 5 years after France completed its repatriation, on August 15, 1971, Richard Nixon proved de Gaulle right. The Nixon shock ended the convertibility of dollars to gold. Foreign governments could no longer exchange their dollar reserves for American gold at $35 per ounce. The system de Gaulle had warned about, the system that allowed America to print money while the world accepted it as payment, was now untethered from any physical constraint. Gold owners thought this would make their metal more valuable. They were partially right. Gold prices rose over the following decade, but they missed the deeper pattern. Every one of these events, 1931, 1933, 1966, 1971, demonstrated the same truth. Governments do not protect gold owners. Governments use gold owners. When the system is stable, governments encourage gold ownership. It keeps citizens calm. It provides an illusion of safety. When the system destabilizes, governments take the gold. They change the rules. They revalue. They confiscate. They restrict. They tax at punitive rates. They declare emergencies and demand patriotic sacrifice. The gold you hold in your safe is only yours until the government decides otherwise. In Germany in 2013, the Bundesbank announced it would repatriate 674 tons of gold from vaults in New York and Paris. The original timeline, 2020. But when they began, something strange happened. The New York Fed could only deliver 5 tons in the first year. Delays, logistical issues. The gold that Germany thought it owned took years to physically retrieve. If a sovereign nation struggles to reclaim its gold from Allied vaults, what chance does an individual have when the next crisis arrives? The gold bugs say, this time is different. They won't confiscate again. History says they always do. But confiscation is only one failure mode. The deeper failure, the one that truly destroys gold's value as a collapse hedge, is what happens when society itself comes apart. In November 1923, a German housewife named Anna Eisenmenger recorded her daily struggle in a diary. The entry for November 15th noted that a single loaf of bread cost 80 billion marks. She had gold jewelry, a wedding ring, a necklace inherited from her mother. She tried to trade them. No baker would accept gold. Gold required verification. Gold required scales. Gold required trust that the person offering it wasn't a thief or a con artist. In the chaos of Weimar hyperinflation, trust had collapsed alongside the currency. Bakers wanted flour, eggs, coal, firewood. They wanted items with immediate utility. Anna's gold sat in a drawer while her family went hungry. This is the first collapse. The second occurred in Argentina in December 2001. The government announced the Corralito, a freeze on all bank accounts. Citizens could withdraw no more than 250 pesos per week. Savings accounts, checking accounts, safety deposit boxes, all locked. And here's what gold owners discovered. Their metal was inside those frozen banks. Safe deposit boxes were inaccessible. The gold they thought would protect them was now held hostage by the same institutions that had destroyed the peso. Those who kept gold at home faced a different problem. Street crime exploded as desperate citizens turned to theft. Holding physical gold meant becoming a target. The third collapse began in Venezuela around 2014 and continues today. Inflation exceeded 1,000,000% by 2018. The bolivar became worthless. And gold? Venezuela has gold reserves. Citizens own gold jewelry, gold coins, gold bars purchased when the economy functioned. But medicine disappeared from pharmacies. Food vanished from grocery stores. The black market priced everything in dollars or goods, not gold. A doctor in Caracas reported trading her grandmother's gold bracelet for a 2-week supply of insulin. The dealer gave her a fraction of the gold's value because he knew she had no choice. When you're desperate, gold doesn't trade at spot price. It trades at desperation price. The fourth collapse struck Lebanon in 2019. Banks froze accounts without warning. The pound lost 98% of its value within 18 months. Citizens who had gold in bank vaults could not access it. Citizens who had gold at home faced roving gangs and home invasions. A businessman in Beirut described the calculation, "I could try to trade gold for dollars on the black market, but the people who buy gold in a crisis are criminals. They know you're desperate, they name their price or they take the gold and give you nothing. Who will you report it to? The police who haven't been paid in months?" Gold in Lebanon became a liability, a reason to be targeted, a metal that advertised your former wealth to people who had lost everything. The fifth collapse consumed Zimbabwe beginning in 2007. Inflation reached 79.6 billion% in November 2008. Currency printed in the morning was worthless by afternoon. And gold? The Zimbabwean government made private gold ownership effectively illegal. Mining operations were nationalized. Citizens caught trading gold faced imprisonment. The regime understood what gold owners rarely admit. Gold is only portable wealth if you can move it across borders. Zimbabwe's borders were controlled by soldiers who would gladly confiscate any gold they found. 5 collapses, 5 continents, 5 different political systems, 5 identical outcomes. Gold failed not because it lost its theoretical value, but because theoretical value means nothing when systems collapse. In a functioning economy, gold can be exchanged for currency, deposited in banks, used as collateral. In a collapsed economy, none of those mechanisms exist. What worked in these collapses? The patterns are consistent across all 5 cases: food production, medical skills, repair capabilities, established networks of trusted people, goods with immediate practical utility, batteries, antibiotics, fuel, tools. The survivors weren't the ones with the most gold. The survivors were the ones who could do things, make things, grow things, fix things. The gold owners waited for stability to return so their metal would regain value. Many of them didn't survive the wait. In the winter of 1847, at the height of the Irish famine, a county-by-county pattern emerged that historians would later call the geography of survival. In County Mayo, mortality rates exceeded 60% in some parishes. In County Wexford, they stayed below 15%. The difference was not wealth, it was not luck, it was land. Families with even small plots, a quarter acre, enough for potatoes and a few chickens, survived. Families without land, the landless laborers who had depended on wages and purchased food, died in roadside ditches with their mouths stained green from eating grass. 1 million dead, 1 million fled, and the survivors shared a common characteristic: productive capacity. Not gold, not savings, not financial assets. The ability to grow food when the systems that distributed food collapsed. This pattern repeated 90 years later on the other side of the world. When Japan surrendered in August 1945, the economy was destroyed. Factories bombed. Infrastructure shattered. Currency worthless. Inflation would exceed 5,000% by 1949. The urban population faced starvation. But certain people rebuilt faster than others. Craftsmen, mechanics, carpenters. Anyone with practical skills that could be traded directly for food or shelter. A Tokyo carpenter named Takeshi Yamamoto recorded his experience. In the first 2 years after surrender, he never used money. He repaired roofs in exchange for rice. He built furniture in exchange for fish. His skills were his currency. By 1950, Yamamoto had rebuilt his workshop and employed 3 apprentices. His neighbors, who had held cash and bonds, were still struggling. Their savings had been inflated away. His skills had compounded. The same pattern emerged in Cuba during the Special Period. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Cuba lost 80% of its imports virtually overnight. Oil shipments stopped. Food imports vanished. The average Cuban lost 20 pounds in the first 3 years of the crisis. But the mortality rates didn't spike the way economists predicted. Why? Community networks. The Cuban government, whatever its other failures, had organized neighborhoods into committees for the defense of the revolution. Block-by-block organizations that knew every family, tracked every need, coordinated every resource. When the crisis hit, these networks pivoted from political surveillance to survival coordination. Families with backyard gardens shared with families without. Mechanics fixed bicycles in exchange for medical consultations from neighborhood doctors. Elderly people who knew traditional food preservation taught young people who had never needed to learn. The social infrastructure absorbed the economic shock. Isolated families suffered. Connected families adapted. And in Russia, after the Soviet collapse, a parallel economy emerged within months, one that revealed exactly what humans value when official systems fail. It wasn't gold. The barter economy of 1991-1993, Russia, ran on cigarettes, vodka, soap, batteries, and medicine. A pack of Marlboros could buy a week of groceries. A bar of imported soap traded for a month of utilities, paid to the building superintendent who hadn't received his salary in 3 months. Pensioners who had saved rubles their entire lives watched those savings become worthless. Factory workers who had stockpiled practical goods, the hoarders mocked by their neighbors during stable times, became the wealthiest people in their buildings. A Russian economist who lived through this period summarized it bluntly. Money is a social agreement. When society breaks, the agreement breaks. What remains is what you can hold, what you can use, and what you can do. 4 collapses, 4 survival patterns, 4 identical conclusions. Land beats gold, the skills beat savings, community beats isolation, utility beats theory. The financial advisors pushing gold don't mention these examples. Perhaps they don't know them. Perhaps the examples don't fit the product they're selling. But the history is documented. The pattern is clear, and the question it raises is uncomfortable. If gold fails in real collapses, what actually works? On August 4th, 1972, Idi Amin gave Uganda's Asian population 90 days to leave the country. Families who had lived there for generations, merchants, doctors, factory owners, had 3 months to abandon everything. They could take what they could carry, nothing more. The wealthiest Asians, those with gold bars and jewelry, faced immediate problems. Border guards searched luggage. Gold was confiscated. Those who hid it successfully arrived in Britain or Canada with metal but no means to convert it. Banks were suspicious. Buyers demanded discounts. The gold that was supposed to guarantee their future became an obstacle to rebuilding. But the doctors rebuilt their practices within 2 years. The engineers found employment within months. The mechanics opened shops. The teachers secured positions. Skills crossed borders. Gold did not. 7 years later, the Iranian Revolution produced the same pattern. Wealthy families fled with jewelry and gold coins sewn into clothing. Many lost everything at airports and border crossings. The Revolutionary Guards knew exactly where to search. The Iranian doctors who reached Los Angeles rebuilt. The engineers who reached London rebuilt. The merchants who reached Dubai rebuilt. Their skills were recognized, valued, portable. Their relatives who had relied on gold, many spent years liquidating assets at fraction prices, struggling to restart lives in countries where their wealth meant nothing. This is the first element of the real hedge: transferable skills. Not credentials, skills. A medical degree from Tehran might not transfer. The ability to diagnose illness, set bones, and treat wounds transfers everywhere. A law degree is jurisdiction specific. The ability to negotiate, analyze contracts, and solve problems is universal. The second element is productive capacity. Land, if you can acquire it. Tools, regardless. Seeds, equipment. Anything that allows you to create value independent of employment, independent of currency, independent of functioning institutions. During World War II, Swiss farmers experienced something their urban countrymen did not. Food security regardless of what happened to banks, borders, or governments. The Swiss franc remained stable, one of history's few examples of currency surviving a continental war. But even Swiss city dwellers learned that currency stability meant nothing when supply chains fractured. Farmers ate, city dwellers negotiated. The third element is stored necessities, not gold, goods, medical supplies with long shelf lives, tools that don't require electricity, water purification, preserved food, batteries, lighters, soap, antibiotics. When the Vietnamese boat people fled between 1975 and 1995, those who survived the journey carried practical goods. Gold was taken by pirates, jewelry was stolen by corrupt officials. But a supply of antibiotics could save a child's life on the boat. A fishing line could provide food, a water container could mean the difference between survival and death at sea. The fourth element is community. Not social media connections. Real relationships with real people who have real skills. Neighbors who would shelter you. Friends who would share food. Networks built on trust established over years. Not transactions completed online. Isolated individuals, no matter how wealthy, face collapse alone. Connected communities distribute risk, share resources, and coordinate defense. The fifth element, and only the fifth, is precious metals. Gold has a role. After the crisis stabilizes. After institutions begin functioning again. After the immediate survival period ends. Gold can be converted to the new currency, whatever it becomes. Gold can purchase assets at depressed prices when stability returns. But gold is the fifth element, not the first. It is the capstone, not the foundation. The financial industry inverts this order because skills can't be sold. Community can't be packaged. Productive capacity requires effort, not just money. Gold can be sold with a click. A commission can be collected. A newsletter subscription can be renewed. So they sell you the fifth element and ignore the first four. And when the collapse comes, you discover the order mattered. In January 2025, the United States national debt crossed $38 trillion. It's not billion, trillion. A number so large it has lost all meaning. Here is what that number means in practical terms. The interest payments on this debt now exceed the entire defense budget. America pays more to service past borrowing than it spends on aircraft carriers, soldiers, and missiles combined. The Congressional Budget Office, a non-partisan agency that exists to provide honest fiscal analysis, projects that deficits will continue indefinitely. Not for a few years. Not until the economy recovers. Indefinitely. The CBO's models show no scenario in which the United States returns to balanced budgets without either massive tax increases or catastrophic spending cuts that no elected official will support. This is not speculation. This is the government's own projection of its own future. And the Federal Reserve's balance sheet tells the same story. In 2008, the Fed held approximately $900 billion in assets. Today, That figure exceeds $7 trillion. The central bank has printed more money in the last 15 years than in the previous 95 years combined. Where does this lead? Turkey provides a preview. In 2021, the Turkish lira began its collapse. President Erdogan insisted that high interest rates caused inflation, the opposite of established monetary theory, and forced the central bank to cut rates while prices spiraled. The lira lost 44% of its value in a single year, then another 30% the following year. Turkish citizens responded rationally. Gold accounts at Turkish banks doubled as citizens fled the lira for anything with tangible value. Demand for dollars exploded. A black market in stable currency emerged. The official exchange rate diverged from the street rate. The Turkish government responded the way governments always respond. Controls. Restrictions on dollar purchases. Requirements to convert export earnings to lira. Capital controls that trapped wealth inside a collapsing system. This is stage 3 of currency collapse. Turkey is living it now. Lebanon reached stage 4 in 2019. Venezuela has been in stage 5, complete collapse, for years. And here is the fact that should terrify anyone paying attention. For the first time in recorded history, 100% of the world's currencies are fiat. Every single one. No major currency is backed by gold, silver, or any physical commodity. This has never happened before. Throughout history, when one currency collapsed, others remained stable because they were anchored to something real. The dollar survived Weimar's collapse. The Swiss franc survived the chaos of World War II. There was always somewhere to flee. Today, every currency floats on the same foundation. Trust. Trust in governments. Trust in central banks. Trust in institutions. When that trust breaks, and it always breaks eventually, where do you flee? The global financial system has become a circular reference. Dollars backed by treasury bonds. Treasury bonds valued in dollars, both dependent on the belief that the system will continue functioning. Central banks understand this. That's why they're buying gold at the fastest pace in 60 years. They're hedging against the system they operate, but they're not telling you to prepare for what that hedging implies. They buy gold for themselves. They print money for you. The warning signs are not subtle. They are not hidden. They are published in official reports, documented in central bank purchases, visible in the daily headlines from Turkey and Lebanon and Argentina. The question is not whether you see them. The question is what you do about them. In 1917, the Russian aristocracy learned a lesson that gold investors still refuse to accept. The Romanov dynasty had ruled for 3 centuries. The noble families surrounding them had accumulated wealth beyond imagination. Palaces, estates, jewelry collections, gold reserves stored in private vaults across Europe. When the revolution came, they believed their gold would save them. It didn't. The nobles who escaped early, who read the signs and fled before the borders closed, arrived in Paris and London with sewn-in jewelry and hidden coins. They sold their gold at desperate prices to fund modest apartments and menial jobs. Former countesses became seamstresses. Former princes became taxi drivers. Their gold bought survival, barely, in a world that didn't care about their former status. The nobles who stayed too long, who believed the Bolsheviks would be defeated, who trusted that their wealth made them untouchable, they died in basements and prison camps. Their gold was confiscated. Their estates were nationalized. Their names were erased from history. Gold did not determine who survived. Timing did. Adaptation did. The willingness to abandon everything and rebuild from skills alone did. This is the lesson that history screams at anyone willing to listen. Wealth is not what you hold. Wealth is what you can do. In the chaos of German hyperinflation, a story circulated that captured this truth perfectly. A farmer outside Munich refused to sell eggs for any amount of paper currency. Buyers arrived with wheelbarrows of marks, literally wheelbarrows, and he turned them away. The currency meant nothing. But he would trade eggs for labor. 1 hour of work repairing his fence earned 2 eggs. 1 day of work harvesting his field earned a week of meals. The people who survived Weimar were not the ones with the most gold. They were the ones who could offer something the farmers needed. Skills, labor, goods with practical utility. The gold holders waited for stability to return. Many starved while waiting. This pattern is not ancient history. It repeated in 2008 in terms clear enough for modern investors to understand. When the financial crisis struck, the S&P 500 fell 46% from peak to trough. Portfolios were devastated. Retirement accounts were gutted. Paper wealth evaporated. Gold was volatile. It initially declined with everything else as investors liquidated to meet margin calls. Then it recovered. Gold investors will point to this recovery as proof of gold's value. But farmland told a different story. During that same crisis, farmland values increased by 17%, not declined. Increased. While stocks collapsed and gold gyrated, productive land that grew crops, generated income, produced food regardless of what markets did, gained value. The volatility numbers are even more striking. From 1992 to 2020, farmland's average volatility was 6.84%. The S&P 500's volatility was 16.9%. Gold's volatility was 14.8%. The stable hedge was more volatile than productive land. The safe haven was twice as unstable as dirt that grows corn. During periods of high inflation, precisely when gold is supposed to shine, farmland returns average 14.67% annually. More than double the inflation rate. Not theory, historical fact. Exposed by the data that gold dealers never mention. Now, returned to Sarajevo, Elvir survived the siege. His 17 gold coins sat untouched for 4 years. When stability finally returned, when the siege ended and banks reopened, he sold the coins. He received less than their theoretical value. The buyers knew he had waited, knew he was selling accumulated desperation. But his wife's medical skills? Those paid dividends every single day of the crisis. His brother's ability to repair generators that kept families alive through winters without power. If Elvir could go back and convert those gold coins into medical supplies before the siege, he would. If he could trade them for tools, training, stored food, community connections, he would make that trade instantly. He cannot. The siege is over. His lesson has been learned. Your siege has not yet begun. The warning signs are documented. The debt is unsustainable. The currency is unbacked. The institutions are fragile. The central banks are hedging for themselves while selling you a different story. You have a choice that the Russian aristocrats had, that the Weimar middle class had, that every generation facing collapse has faced. Prepare now or scramble later. The real hedge is not gold. The real hedge is what you can do when systems fail. The skills that transfer across borders, the land that produces regardless of currency, the goods that have utility when supply chains break, the community that shares and protects and survives together, and yes, some precious metals, but only after the foundation is built. Most people will ignore this. They always do. They will buy gold because it's easy, because it's advertised, because it feels like preparation without requiring change. They will learn what Elvir learned, what the Russian aristocrats learned, what every gold holder in every collapse has learned. Metal is not wealth. Capability is wealth. The coming crisis will not look like past crises. It will be faster, more connected, more global. When Western currencies falter, and they will falter together, because they're all built on the same foundation of debt and trust. The flight to safety will find no safe harbor, except for those who built their own. The question isn't whether collapse is coming. The question is whether you'll be standing in line wondering how bread costs $1 billion, or standing in your garden trading eggs for a loaf. The choice is yours. The time to make it is now. Don't buy gold. Build what gold cannot buy.